GM everyone, welcome back to another episode of Touch Grass Podcast. Today we have Ganesh from Covalent. Me and Rachit used to work with them a couple years back, and we've been following the journey all this time. And it's pretty cool to finally have him on and chat all things about data, agents, agentic economy, and also their recent Hyperliquid launch that they have this past week itself. So super excited. Welcome to the show, Ganesh. How are you?
KG Rachit, it's a pleasure to be here. Glad to connect after many years and excited to see how this unfolds.
Awesome. Before we dive in, right? Like you've been in the space since 2018, is that right?
Correct. Yeah, don't date me there, but yeah, that's about it.
So you are one of the OGs, and you've seen multiple cycles, and you've seen the what kind of things have been innovated over the past years. But right now, even though we haven't have all these new awesome headlines and all this adoption, it still feels the sentiment is insanely low compared to in general what's happening. And in April, we've had some of the biggest hacks, and people are like, "Is DeFi even necessary?" People are questioning even that. So as you reflect upon all these years, and as you've been in both sides of these kind of phases, without adoption and with massive adoption, in terms of just in general, what are your thoughts, right? Like after all these years being in the space, where do you think crypto is right now? Anything positive that you want to share before we get started?
Absolutely. So I think the it's a great place to start. By the way, the question of like why are we here, right? And I think the you always have to go back and remember why did you enter this space? Did you enter because there's a euphoria and it was up only and you can make a lot of money, or it's a genuine technology play that can shift the world, or it's upskilling because I think the cycles are so compressed in crypto that you can learn a lot in a few years. So you have to go back and understand what was that genesis moment? Why did you enter this space? Why did you decide to dedicate your career towards this? And if that has changed, then I think it's very clear that you need to make a move. Maybe move to AI, move to robotics, move to something else, right? If that hasn't changed, then I think you just have to learn to live with the ups and downs, build a little more resiliency, build a stronger stomach, and continue on. So that's point number one. So for me, personally, we started Covalent in 2018 before there was NFTs, before there was DeFi, before there was stable coins, before any of the actual excitement comes in. But the underlying, this immutable ledger is something that is undeniable. This is, this can change economies. This can change the politics of society. This can change the fabric of how people conduct business and trust each other. And being on the receiving end of scams, and this is even prior to crypto. It's hard to not be cynical about how society is evolving, and this is not specific to me. Like you see, the trust in institutions is at an all-time low. There's like fraud every level of the step, right? And the promise of crypto is to bring complete transparency, and it's a newer, brighter society. So that is what I'm excited about. Along the way, we've learned a lot. We've made some money, lost more money than made money, of course, and so on. Made some great friends and so on. So that's the point number one I would make. Go back to why did you enter this space? Point number two I would say is that generally bear markets are longer than bull markets. So this euphoric moment is only for maybe a few months. That's it. And then there's about 18 months to 2 years of just, nothing happening, choppy, sideways markets, and the trauma is like, so when people think back, the people are complaining more for 18 months, and then they're happy for like 3 months or 4 months, right? And so sometimes you don't even know that the bull market you're in a bull market, right? So I'd say the peak was maybe April 2024, so 2 years ago, right? And then who would have known, there would be a war that broke out and like DeFi getting hacked on a daily basis and so on, right? So I think there's light at the end of the corner. I think there's like lots of other crises, but I'm not a trader, so I don't know how to trade or benefit from this. So I go back and understand what are the
Yeah.
compounding technologies that build value over time.
I think Even I, for a while, even I thought that this has to do something about prices, but I think this past couple of weeks, I don't think it's about the prices. People have like seriously kind of losing hope on things they love about the space. Like for so long, they're like DeFi is this alternate thing, and suddenly you have, things you like Arbitrum, and they're making these decisions, and everyone is questioning, is decentralization even here, and all these 2021, 2020 topics that everyone keeps debating. Feels like we're back to that position. But yeah, I agree with you. There's light at the end of the tunnel, and we've seen worse bear markets, obviously, and yeah. Rachit, you want to add something?
No, I think a beautiful segue for this is like Ganesh, take us back to like 2018 when you were just sort of starting off in the space. Like, we typically see founders moving like I want to build an L1 or an L2, like an ecosystem. I want to build a dApp. But like Covalent at the time was like doing something very different where it was like we want to focus on data. Obviously, there have been pivots along the way, and we'll talk about the latest pivot and what you're focused on right now. But like talk to us about that stage where you're like, okay, I want to get into crypto, this is what I want to do.
Yeah. So, Rachid, you give me too much credit. You make me look like a genius who knew or like a fortune teller. But it's not nothing of that sort. I only know data infrastructure. That's all I've worked my entire career. I don't know about the application space. I don't know about L1s. But what I do know is databases and database infrastructure. And so it's just natural. And in fact, the word covalent comes from covalent bonds in chemistry. I used to be a physical chemist before this, and there we are binding databases and blockchains, right? So blockchain is just a database that is immutable ledger, just a specialized data structure. That's all it is. So I wouldn't say like I have the magic 8 ball and I could like foresee the future. But fundamentally, I think a lot of things have turned out to be in our favor. So in 2020, Snowflake went out to be the biggest blockbuster IPO of that decade. So Snowflake is a database infrastructure. I would say in the next 18 months, there's a couple of big projects going out in the public markets, SpaceX being one, Anthropic, OpenAI, and then something that people don't talk about is Databricks. Databricks is another monster IPO. The last round valuation is the same valuation as Anthropic, right? Again, that is data infrastructure. So this data piece has been around for like a long time. Oracle databases have been around for 50 years. Nothing has changed, right? So a lot of the technologies we use today are technologies that were invented in the 80s and 90s, right? Even before I was born. So I think this is the Lindy effect really matters. So just from my experience, I've already had about a decade of experience in data infrastructure prior to Covalent. My experience is that at the end of the day, your systems, your processes, your people might change, but the data infrastructure has so much gravity that it's not easy to retool or retrain your people. And so what you need is basically a connecting piece that lets institutions and enterprises adopt this new technology. So in an enterprise setting, you still have an IBM system from like 50 years ago running your back office infrastructure, and it's not broken, it works great. Like, why fix it? So all you have is like new connectors, you have Excel, you have web, you have all this stuff, but it doesn't matter. The data infrastructure has that gravity. So that was the initial thesis behind Covalent. And then over the years, with the tokenization piece, with the sequencer piece, with the AI piece, with all of the other things, is just the ebb and flows of crypto. Some of it is because we were able to predict the future and build towards what we would like to see in the world. Some of it is just what was the norm at that point.
That makes sense. And Ganesh, now we're sort of seeing like these sort of data infrastructure plays that, similar to Covalent, now sort of move into the AI space. Was this always like the plan when you were starting Covalent off? Like, did you predict the AI boom and pivot, think that, we're building this for the future, for this sort of AI future? Or is that something that you figured out along the way? Like, this is also an important part of the business.
I wouldn't say specifically for AI. Again, Rachid, you're a very kind person. Give me a lot of credit on this spot. No, I wouldn't say it's we had the forethought of that, but I do know that data is not interchangeable. Like it is like super core. Like right now, we work with hundreds of applications out there, and what is something they all need? They need data. And so Jeff Bezos has this. Jeff Bezos is the founder of Amazon. Had this amazing quote that don't think of things that change. Think about things that don't change and focus on that. So in the case of Amazon, faster delivery, cheaper delivery, same delivery, like people are not going to say, give me slow delivery, give me more expensive delivery. So with data infrastructure, people aren't going to say, give me slow data, give me malformed, misattributed data, give me corrupted data, right? They're always going to say better, faster, cheaper, better, faster, cheaper. So it's just this, the eye of the tornado, which is when there's a tornado going on, there's a lot of things up in the air around you, but the eye of the tornado is super calm. It's like a monastery. And so we are sitting at the eye of the tornado. You have AI, you have stablecoins, you have RWAs, you have perps, but what is the thing that underlines all of this is data. So that's why it's so calm. We are on that relentless mission to get the best and the fastest and the cheapest data day after day.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Ganesh, do you want to talk a little bit about, just sort of set the tone for the episode? Like, there's obviously Covalent, and then there's a lot of comms that come out around Goldrush, which is the new AI sort of adjacent product you built. Just so that everyone is clear on what is what, can you give a brief on both? Like, this is Covalent, this is how Covalent powers Goldrush.
Absolutely. So when we started, everything was covalent, right? And it was just this overloaded word, covalent. We had the covalent network, we had the covalent API, we had the covalent token, we had covalent employees, and so on. And people are just getting very, very confused, right? It's like from an SEO perspective, from a ideal customer profile, from a sales perspective, it was just super confusing. It does have a lot of brand equity as well. Like people still remember, so we had this data alchemist program from a few years ago. We trained, I think, 15,000 people, taught them data skills, and they still have that on their resume. So covalent, the word itself, has a lot of brand equity. So what we decided maybe 2 years ago is to refactor the brands. So, have Goldrush as the developer API. So anything that has to do with developers, API, programmatic experience, that is under Goldrush. Right, so Goldrush data, it's all, you get the things. I love these meme kind of words. So now that's cleaned off a lot of stuff in terms of if people come to Goldrush, they know they want an API for on-chain data, right? Nothing else. And now that ICP has expanded to agents, right? So we've done a lot of fundamental, agentic improvements to the Goldrush API using MCP, using X402. That agents is now a big persona that is consuming this on-chain data, right? So it's not just devs, but it's also agents. And I would say, if I'm being underplaying this, the agentic workflows would be 100x, 1,000x more than the developer uses. There's hundreds of more agents than humans, and so that's the Goldrush thing. So now what Covalent has become is that underlying data infrastructure. It's this idea of having data that is proof-based, idea that data can be democratized, the idea that all of the value kind of accrues to the data layer, right? So one of the things that's happened with AI and vibe coding and all of what has happened is that everything compresses to one data infrastructure layer. So that is where Covalent is, that's where the Covalent network is, and that's where the Covalent token is. But now if you're building something for, I'm just making this up. If you're making something for salespeople, it would not be called Goldrush and it won't be called Covalent because it's something different. So that's basically what it comes down to.
Awesome. Let's kind of get deeper into that. I'm not much of a vibe coder myself, like Rachit, but let's say if we want to kind of backtest some strategies and we want to get into pull this on-chain data and backtest some strategies on our own, build a tool for the community and stuff. How does someone go and use Goldrush? What's that like? Is it just pulling the API, or what does that look like for someone who's just a vibe coder on the weekends? How does someone like that get access and get started with Goldrush?
Fantastic question. So Goldrush is an API product, right? There's no front end, there's no UI, there's no face. The face is a programmatic. It speaks JSON, so that's what the experience is. So what you can then do is you can go to any of these vibe coding tools, be it Lovable or be it Bold or Claude Code or Codex or any of these tools. There are hundreds of these, Replit, for example. And then you can say, build me a dashboard that shows me my token balances for this wallet and use the Goldrush API for it. You can one-shot this dashboard. So it gives you a full dashboard of your positions, your current spot prices, and so on. So where does Goldrush end and where does the vibe coding layer, the inference layer start, right? So Goldrush, we've designed the API in a way which is super seamless. Like this is even before AI was a thing. So if you look at all of the other competing solutions, because Goldrush is the product, it's not an afterthought, right? Most other products, if you look at Nansen and you look at Etherscan, the API, even CoinGecko, API is an afterthought. That's not their main product. For us, Goldrush is the main product. So there's been a lot of like design that has gone into that API, including like unfolding the objects, not having nested objects, making it flatten, and a couple of like things, having the consistency in the API key names, right? If you look at our competitors, 2 different endpoints have 2 completely different schemas. And on top of that, you also have the unified schema, which means that same API works across hundreds of chains today. You only have to change one character. So these are like design principles that we've brought into the API that makes it super simple. And from there, and so the benefit of that is that agents don't have to overthink this. They just get it. And so there's no gotchas, there's no nuances, there's no like exceptions, there's no like, oh, it's almost this, but not this. For Solana, it's a bit different. There's none of these like, edge cases. So it just works. So you can one-shot this dashboard, be it for any use case. It could be a market making dashboard. It could be your token balances. It could be a security dashboard. It could be live prices. It could be like correlation. It's whatever you want, right? So think of it as, a can of tomato sauce and some pasta, and whether you want to make whatever kind of pasta you want to bake it, you want to cook it, you want to like fry it, it's totally up to you. So I think the power is in the person in front of the API.
Yeah, KG, like from my personal experience using the API, by the way, KG, we are participating in the Goldrush hackathon that's going on right now. I have to tell you. But from my experience, there's a lot less of Claude, this isn't working, please figure this out. Like that's just from a vibe coder perspective, like I don't know a lot, but that's sort of one of the changes that I've seen in this whole thing. Ganesh, talking about, I think from our experience working with you back when I was at Scribe, everything that you did was based on a thesis. It was based on a lot of thought. Like I think Covalent as a company does not do things out of the wind or just to sort of do things. For you to sort of pivot or not pivot, but expand into this AI agent narrative, you must have a lot of belief into the use cases of AI agents and where AI agents are going. Uh, how did those conversations go internally? What was the thought process? Do you believe in the vision of 90% of transactions will actually be AI agents in the next few years? Like, talk to us about that stuff.
100%. So when ChatGPT came out a few years ago, what we did is we built internal muscle to figure these things out. So we built a whole bunch of experiments, including like remixing your NFTs, right? If NFTs are intellectual property and being able to build royalties on that. So we built a whole bunch of like experiments just to play with the stuff and so on. And then what happened, I would say maybe a year ago, last summer, is that this whole like vibe coding and this stuff started happening. And if you see today, after Opus 4.6, we've been maybe in the November, December timeframe. So just like 4 months ago, I would be very confident in saying that 90% of the code today at Covalent is vibe coded, right? People are not even opening their IDE. So we're spending tens of thousands of dollars on AI inference costs using the latest model, and our shipping velocity has gone through the roof, right? And I'm actually very proud of that fact that we've been able to scale up our production quality, because in a software company, most of your value accrues at the rate of like shipping software. That's what it comes down to. So we've been able to ship. If you look at our changelog on Goldrush, there's like something that's coming out on a weekly basis. And these are not like small features. These are like massive features, right? There does require, you need to write a product requirements doc and so on. So it's very clear that on the programmatic side, with programming and software engineering, the agentic workflow it's already happened, right? I can see this firsthand and across the network, and that's kind of crazy to see. On the content generation side, we have an internal tool that builds with memory. So now what we're able to do is we're able to use the latest models, be it Hugging Face or Pika or Gemini, or if any of the agentic stuff like Nano Banana, we have these preset prompts with knowledge, with a knowledge base that's able to create like standardized output, right? So we use this tool internally, we call it mission control. At some point we'll open sources and so on. So on the content generation side, it's taken over. No, there's no question about this, right? We literally used to have a motion designer at Covalent, super excellent, highly talented individual, has done campaigns for Starbucks and Nike and so on. And it used to take him about a week to render these videos, and exceptional videos. If you look at our motion graphics from 22, 23, really top shelf quality. Now those videos, I would say the same quality is about 3 minutes and about 10 cents on Hugging Face, right? The same quality. And I showed it to him a few weeks ago and he was shocked, right? So content generation, software generation, definitely the agentic workflow, right? So I think the future of on-chain transactions, you'll never trust an agent to do this completely end-to-end. The autonomous thing is still a ways out. There's always going to be a human in the loop. So if you see like with, I'll give you an example, right? Like contracts, legal contracts. There's a lot more like legal contracts happening. There's a lot more software being created, a lot more content being generated, but you still need that human, that's that taste editor that is able to say, okay, this is in line, this is not in line. So their workload has actually increased. If you look at the guys who are actually like the approvals manager, they're working 24/7 because there's like so much stuff coming at them, right? So I would say with the transaction stuff, it's the same kind of thing, right? Like, you're seeing simple things like that today. For example, you look at a chart and it sets up your trade. It tells you this is your SLTP like tolerances, right? That's just an example. So I think the future of this is more of a co-pilot kind of like thing. You still need a human in the driver's seat, but a lot of the normal stuff, right, which you have to like do this, it'll just be going at a much, much faster rate.
Do you feel like, whenever people talk about AI agents in crypto, it's like, okay, an AI agent running hedge fund on chain, AI agent doing some transactions for me, managing my money on chain, finding yields on different pools. If as a human I can't optimize yield in this, every couple minutes sending in and out, is that what you also envision, like what these can do, or is there something at the peak of the mountain where you see the real potential of these things?
No, I think the way these things would actually take get ground or get adoption is not going to look like anything that we've seen today, right? So go back to how disruptive the internet was. If you look at the companies from the early internet days, it's basically off-chain or off-internet like banks and bookstores online. That's it. So it took about a decade before you were able to see internet native applications like an Uber, right? Uber would not have been possible if not for the internet and cell phones, right? Airbnb, or even for that matter, like Instacart. That same Instacart idea was tried like 10 years prior. It was like called Webvan. It was a colossal failure. But 10 years after, things have changed, right? YouTube, for example, that's an internet native like application. Like you've always had cable, but there's like user generated content. So I think we're yet to see these on-chain native kind of applications, right? So everything we see today is just taking what we have today, like yield generation, and moving it on-chain, which I don't think is that interesting, to be honest. It's not honestly,
Yeah.
if you look at me personally, right, I'm not like sitting in front of a computer like managing my yield, right? I actually just have like the Vanguard ETFs. That's all I have. So I have just put in the index funds. I don't really care day to day, because for me, compounding matters more than like hustling through like a couple of bips here and there.
Yeah. I
ETS
think
looking good here.
Casey, what I think will happen is we'll see like AI native gambling become thing. Like everyone's just gonna have a moon bag with their AI agent and be like, hey, if you can turn this to $1,000, good. If you don't, then I'm just gonna change you. Like you're no longer gonna exist, and that's sort of what's gonna happen. Ganesh, I know we did only block the 30 for the spot. I do want to, target on a topic that we love talking about on the show, which is Hyperliquid. I love the fact that Gold Rush has been going all in on Hyperliquid. You talk about Hyperliquid traders. let's talk about why Hyperliquid first. Like, why is that a market that Covalent and Goldrush is targeting right now?
Fantastic question. Let's spend quite a bit on this. I've become hype built now. So after like looking into it, I initially thought it was just another perps, exchange. I've seen lots of these in the past. Like, what's going on here? So Hyperliquid has done a couple of things like really, really right. Right. One is the technology works at an unprecedented scale. So Hyperliquid works at 85 millisecond block times. Right. So it's a specialized L1 or a specialized database purely for doing these transactions. It doesn't do generic EVM transactions. They have Hype EVM, which is an EVM chain, but that has no traction today. So what Hypercore has today is these specialized data structures for perps and for trading. The second thing they did right is that this whole narrative angle, right? No VCs, so no unlocks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that is a fantastic thing. That's how they are able to differentiate. Now, they maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. That's not the point. The point is you have to be differentiated in the market. Every other, like look at Lighter now, right? I heard the last time Lighter, they're going to rename it to Heavier because of the token price. No, just kidding. That's totally a joke. But I'm sure your Hyperliquid guys would love it. Anyways, so it's because all the VCs are like dumping. So it doesn't matter if they're dumping or not. The perception matters a lot, right? Perceptions matter. The third is the airdrop. Very, very generous airdrop. It's made basically life-changing, impact on a lot of people. The fourth is, all the HIPs, right? So HIP3 is this builder markets where you can like bring in additional liquidity. So it becomes just from an application, which is Hyperliquid, the app, to infrastructure. So other people can bring the liquidity and so on. And so that's happened. And then the fifth thing is just timing thing. If you see what has happened after war, is that the only place to express your financial direction with these commodities is on Hyperliquid because they're open on the weekends. So on certain days, actually, crude oil has more traction than Bitcoin. So that's fantastic to see. And then they say HIP4, which is the opinion markets, prediction market space, has some novelty there as well. So it's become infrastructure for all these financial. So they're going towards that housing all of finance. So these are the things that they've done really, really well. Now, why Goldrush and Hyperliquid? So historically, like I would say over the last like 6-7 years, we've shied away from anything that looks like a centralized exchange, right? So we don't support Binance, we don't support Coinbase or Bybit or any of these things, right? Anything that's kind of centralized, it's kind of like, because in the data space, you get rug pull on the schemas. They'll change the schemas and then it's just a mess, right? And this is one of the problems with the Cosmos ecosystem, which is it's a different venue. Like the schemas are all it's a mess. That's why nothing has been able to survive on Cosmos. So it comes back to data all the time. So we looked at this space maybe 4 or 5 months ago, and when the HIP3 market started launching, started to see the caliber of people who are interested. So an ecosystem equals the people in that ecosystem, right? And you could see this, the early Ethereum wave of people, the quality of people who are involved there, right? Exceptional people. If you look on Solana, the early Solana people, they're all exceptional people. They're all they're based on the ideology. They're not just here for the quick bucks. The guys who held when Solana dropped to $8 are the true OGs, right? They're the guys, who are the you can see that with Chainlink as well, right? So I was starting to see the same kind of caliber of people who were coming in here. Then I said, okay, let's go all in, right? Let's figure out from first principles, how do we build the best data infrastructure for this? And I'm very proud to say today, after about 4 or 5 months worth of hardcore work, we do have the best infrastructure. At some points, our pricing API is even faster than the prices you see on the Hyperliquid website. So there's a whole bunch of things we've done on the back end to facilitate that, including running servers in Japan and procuring private backbone and so on. But we can get into the technical bits if there's of interest. But otherwise, happy to keep it high level opportunity and so
on. Before we get into what the actual dashboard is and how a trader can use it, when you kind of announced this thing that you're building something on Hyperliquid, what was the response? Anything related to Hyperliquid, it gets massive traction on Twitter. The entire army will come and support you. Did that happen for you guys? And did you kind of realize yeah, there's this group of people similar to maybe, as you said, Link Marines or Soul Manlets. Did that happen for you guys, like when you were kind of exploring Hyperliquid?
Yes and no. Yes and no. And I'll tell you just from my experience, like what generally happens, right? So if you're a Hyperliquid native application, you get a lot of juice. And you're seeing this with some infrastructure providers, including native markets that has USDH, right? And so they're like the preferred thing. But at some point, the market is too small just to be Hyperliquid only. You have to expand to other ecosystems. And when that happens, your tribe who is rooting for you now turns against you. So that becomes like a toxic relationship. And you're able to see this now with the apps. So the top builder codes that we spoke to in October,
Yeah.
November, December, they were Hyperliquid only, and the Hyperliquid whole ecosystem was behind them. And the minute they added lighter and they added like extended and Pacifica, like Hyperliquid just rejected them. It's like self-reject. So there's pros and cons to that for sure, right? So for us, we're an agnostic, independent provider, right? We're not on one single ecosystem. We serve customers on Solana, on the EVM chains, and on Hyperliquid. So there's definitely a lot of interest. A lot of the big Hyperliquid bulls are like, we're in talks with them, the whales and so on. But I think the life cycle of these projects are like a couple of years. So let's see where this
Yeah.
lands.
Awesome. So I trade on Hyperliquid, I trade on Lighter, but I usually check data on Hyperliquid because it's much bigger and it kind of gives a better signal for what's happening and stuff. So how do I kind of navigate, Ganesh, the tool that you guys have built as a trader? How does it help me? What should I look for?
Absolutely. So this tool that we built, it's at hyperliquid.goldrush.dev. So that's the if you have like show notes, we should put it down there. So this dashboard, we're just starting to build this, so it's only been a few weeks. We started to like put together. Initially, it was meant to be a showcase of our data, right? How powerful our data is. How can we build insights in sub-second that wasn't possible through other like Hyperliquid dashboards. And then we found out, of course, this dashboard is all vibe coded, right? It shows you like how powerful vibe coding is. The person who built it didn't even open a code editor or anything. It's just like straight up like spoken English. And so then we decided, okay, this is actually quite powerful, man. This is like crazy. So now what we're doing is we're going to all the different apps in the ecosystem and asking them to copy features from this dashboard into their app. And so we're basically like the ecosystem play here is we're looking to elevate the entire space. So you don't always have to come to hyperliquid.goldrush.dev to like check this out. You can definitely like, we have a couple of like apps coming up. So there's a couple of things that are very, very interesting. First is that the markets are all sorted. There's about 600 markets on Hyperliquid. So each market type is a bit different on the infrastructure, on the data side, and so on. So we unified all of that stuff. What that means is that HIP3 markets, spot market, perp markets, soon HIP4 markets, they're all neatly laid out, and there's a sub-navigation part on the kind of asset it is. So if you go to HIP3 markets, you can sort it by the builder. So if you want to just have a cohort of FLX or Cash or any of these like builders, you can just click into them. And the whole dashboard is personalized to that underlying kind of like subsection or the drill down that you have, including the heat maps and so on. So that's point number one. Point number two, there's a lot more coming here. There's like going to be cross-market correlation, liquidation heat maps and all that stuff. So it's still like pending, or it's like continuously improving. Point number two, this is my favorite. This is why I asked for this deeply, is this live television. So one of the issues that has happened with the war right now is that you can't really trust anyone, right? So you see CNN, it's done like anti-American. You look at Al Jazeera, they take money from the Qataris, so they're like have a very special kind of like thing. If you look at the Middle East, the news is like banned. Like there's a news blanket. If you look at Indian news, one day they're like pro-Israel, next day they're my Arab brothers, the next day it's like my Iranian best friends, next day Trump my best, like whatever, right? So they're like it's a bit like kind of place. So if you want to truly understand what's going on, you got to triangulate all of the things, right? We'll be adding a lot more here, but this is live TV, so you can go and play this on, and you can just like check out what's happening in the news and so on, right? So that's basically it. So this is a start, but the idea here is to showcase the data, We'll probably add a trading feature here. Why not, right? It has the best data, and so that's really the get up here. But a lot more. Like, this is very, very early stages.
Awesome, Ganesh. I think we're at time. One of our question is, if all this plays out, and anything that if all this plays out, what will Covalent look like? And is there anything that you'd like to see people build on top of using all the tools and dashboards you're currently pushing out? Anything that comes to mind?
Yeah. So if all of this plays out, this would be the final data infrastructure standing. And we've seen infrastructure come and go, infrastructure that hasn't been able to live up to the demand. The demand is definitely surging. If you look at the layer zero hack that happened with the whole like Aave thing, it was an RPC that was compromised, right? There was like no quorum or no proof-based system. So we're building systems that will live for 100 years, right? So that is our like core ideology at Covalent on the data side, because data equals truth. And if you manipulate data, you don't know what the ground truth is anymore. So what this means is that the data has to be flexible enough to serve any and all use cases. So today that's RWAs, that's stable coins, that's perps. Maybe a year ago it was meme coins. Maybe next year it's something else. It doesn't matter, right? So it's a union of all of these things. And from a value accretive angle, which is also important because you want to build something that's valuable in the world, it's clear that these apps potentially make a lot of revenue in the short term, but ultimately the durable revenue comes back to that infrastructure layer. So that's where everything compresses down. So that's our thesis today at Covalent. So we have some a new website and so on coming out. But on the Goldrush side, it's always better, faster, cheaper data. That's what it comes down to.
Awesome. I'll definitely, once the entire dashboard is up and running with all the features you said, I'll definitely add it to my toolkit as I navigate these markets as well. And of course, thank you so much, Ganesh, for coming on today. And hopefully we'll see you again.
Thank you, guys. Nice reconnecting. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.